My name is Sydney Stromberg, and I chose the topic Views of War as Illustrated in Poetry. Authors I chose are Margaret Atwood, of the past, and Pablo Neruda, of the present. Margaret Eleanor Atwood is a Canadian writer who has many acclaimed works, spanning the genres of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. She is recognized by her feminist perspective, and many of her novels include themes of new beginnings and role reversal, often taking place in dystopian worlds. Atwood's poetry condemns materialism and contemplates human actions, among other things. She has won 2 Governor General's Literary Awards, for poetry or drama for The Circle Game in 1966, and for fiction for The Handmaid's Tale in 1985. She also won the Booker Prize for The Blind Assassin in 2000, and won the PEN Pinter Prize in 2016 for her spirit of political activism that is present throughout her life and works. Pablo Neruda, born as Neftali Ricardo Reyes Basualto, was a Chilean poet, diplomat, and politician who has been dubbed as one of the most, if not the most, influential and important Latin American poets of the 20th century. He began writing poetry at age 10, though his father tried to discourage him from writing. That is most likely why he began publishing his work under the name Pablo Neruda, a name which he legally adopted in 1946. Since poetry did not always cover his expenses, Neruda needed another source of income and decided to climb the political ranks for a job, beginning as an honorary consul and eventually becoming a Chilean senator in 1945. Neruda was also a passionate communist, which resulted in Neruda being exiled from Chile for 4 years. In 1952, when he returned to Chile, his poetry had made him rich and famous, allowing him to live comfortably and travel extensively. Neruda's poetry is extremely varied, but the 4 main directions it takes are love poetry, material poetry where his loneliness and depression are highlighted, epic poetry, and his poetry of common, everyday objects. These 4 distinctions correlate to 4 parts of Neruda's life and personality. Finally, near the end of his life, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971. They Are Hostile Nations by Margaret Atwood. In view of the fading animals, the proliferation of sewers and fears, the sea clogging, the air nearing extinction, we should be kind, we should take warning, we should forgive each other. Instead, we are opposite. We touch as though attacking. The gifts we bring, even in good faith maybe, warp in our hands to implements, to maneuvers. Put down the target of me, you guard inside your binoculars. In turn, I will surrender. This aerial photograph, your vulnerable sections marked in red, I have found so useful. See, we are alone in the dormant field, the snow that cannot be eaten or captured. Here there are no armies. Here there is no money. It is cold and getting colder. We need each other's breathing warmth. Surviving is the only war we can afford. Stay walking with me. There is almost time if we can only make it as far as the, possibly, last summer. So how does this poem relate to views of war as seen in poetry? Well, first you must understand that Margaret Atwood has strong political views. Then you must look at when the poem was written, which was in 1974. These things combined with the contents of the poem make it clear that the poem is speaking about the Cold War, and perhaps specifically the Cuban Missile Crisis. The poem makes it clear that Atwood feels that the nations involved in the Cold War should be at peace and helping each other rather than fighting. Atwood clearly feels that the tension of this non-war is unnecessary. I explain a few things by Pablo Neruda. You are going to ask, and where are the lilacs, and the poppy-petaled metaphysics, and the rain repeatedly spattering its words and drilling them full of apertures and birds? I'll tell you all the news. I lived in a suburb of Madrid, with bells and clocks and trees. From there you could look out over Castile's dry face, a leather ocean. My house was called the House of Flowers because in every cranny geraniums burst. It was a good-looking house with its dogs and children. Remember, Raoul? Raphael? Federico, do you remember? From under the ground, my balconies on which the light of June drowned flowers in your mouth? Brother, my brother! Everything loud with big voices, the salt of merchandises, pile-ups of palpitating bread, the stalls of my suburb of Argüelles with a statue like a drained inkwell in a swirl of hay, oil flowed into spoons, a deep baying of feet and hands swelled in the streets, meters, liters, the sharp measure of life, stacked up fish, the texture of roofs with the cold sun in which the weather vane falters, the fine frenzied ivory of potatoes, wave on wave of tomatoes rolling down the sea. And one morning, all that was burning, one morning the bonfires leapt out of the earth, devouring human beings, and from then on fire, gunpowder from then on, and from then on blood. Bandits with plains and moors, bandits with finger rings and duchesses, bandits with black friars spattering blessings came through the sky to kill children, and the blood of children ran through the streets without fuss, like children's blood. Jackals that the jackals would despise, stones that the dry thistle would bite on and spit out, vipers that the vipers would abominate. Face to face with you, I have seen the blood of Spain tower like a tide, to drown you in one wave of pride and knives. Treacherous generals, see my dead house. Look at broken Spain. From every house burning metal flows instead of flowers. From every socket of Spain, Spain emerges. And from every dead child a rifle with eyes. And from every crime bullets are born which will one day find the bullseye of your hearts. And you'll ask, why doesn't his poetry speak of dreams and leaves and the great volcanoes of his native land? Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. So how does this poem relate to views of war as seen in poetry? Again, after reading the poem and looking into the background of the poem, we can decipher the meaning of, I explain a few things. This poem talks about the Spanish Civil War and how it has ruined the town of Madrid, where Neruda lived. It reflects Neruda's feelings of outrage at all the bloodshed during the Spanish Civil War. It also highlights Neruda's passion for political issues. As this poem explicitly talks about the horrors of the war, we can clearly see the author's opinion of disdain towards war. Both of these poems featured strong opinions against war that were evident after the first reading. However, after researching the authors and reading each poem a second time revealed a deeper meaning. Both authors are and were very politically active and opinionated. In Margaret Atwood's poem, They Are Hostile Nations, she is explaining the Cold War from an outsider's perspective, which, perhaps, makes it even more meaningful as she pleads for peace. In Pablo Neruda's poem, I Explain a Few Things, we see his experience as a consul in Spain. His experiences there clearly led him to appreciate the city of Madrid, which reflects in his poem as he states his anger about the Spanish Civil War. Therefore, my opinion of the poems did change after researching the authors and rereading the poems. Finally, here's my works cited page.